Live. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Nerrill. I help professionals show up to make the impact they want. And I want to welcome you to my weekly Facebook Live. Today is Wednesday, May 6th, 2020, and this is show number 97 called Managing Worry During COVID-19. Please welcome to the show my good friend and a dear coaching colleague, David Diehl. David, welcome.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you're able to join us today. And so for as we're welcoming people into the room and they're coming on in, David and I go back a few years because we went through coach training together with IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And we're so thankful for the coach community that we have and the friendships and relationships we've made. But with all of my coaching colleagues, David has a very special relationship in that during our program, he served as one of my my peer coaching coaches that I had. And so I'm always appreciative of that opportunity there. So it's good to see you again, my friend.
It's good to see you. We always talk about phone. It's good to see your face.
Absolutely, right. We've done some phone calls and things in prep for this. So David, what's really nice here is we've got some people who join us live. And so if they have any questions or comments, just to go ahead and type them into the chat box. But you and I are going to have a conversation about what worry has looked like. So just as we get started, I want people to get to know you a little bit. So if you would just, introduce yourself and give us your background and tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. First, let me just congratulate you on your great progress that you have made since we were in school together.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
You've done very, very well for yourself, and congratulations on your new book coming out. I look forward to getting a copy of it, a signed copy, no less.
Yeah, it's coming. Absolutely.
Yeah. Congratulations, and thanks for having me. Gosh, my background is, I'll be 65 in a couple of weeks, so I've got scores of living behind me, scores of years, and so this is I just retired, and I've started to launch my coaching business a few months ago, but COVID kicked in, so it's on pause for the time being. But my background is as a minister, and then as an educator and an educational administrator, and I transitioned into coaching because I still feel like I have something to give. I don't want to quit yet, and so I'm still motivated and driven and energetic, and hopefully, in this last phase of my life, I'll be able to make it meaningful to some folks that come into my life.
So when you think about the coaching work that you're doing and you're planning to do, who would you say is an ideal client for you?
I think on two levels. The personal life coaching, I think I have a lot to offer there in terms of working with folks on personal issues. I still have very much of a pastor's heart, and so I care very deeply for the individual, but I really excel in working with small groups, team building, working with managers. I've worked with C-suite folks at the local community college and coaching them while I was working for the college. And so I like to work with leadership development and team buildings. And I focus on helping people to look at themselves and see what's going on in their heads, what their values look like, and making sure that there's alignment, and helping people to make transitions in thought processes that would help them to be more successful in their work, or more effective in in leadership, or problem solving, communicating with coworkers. So that's where I'm most comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great way for you to leverage all of your talent and expertise throughout your career into this new venture. So congrats to you. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So David, I invited you on today because you do a lot of work around mindset, and worry has been something that has just come up a lot for so many people because of COVID. And it's been worry about our health and our loved ones and our jobs and what we get to do. And so as we get started today, could you just define for us what worry is from your lens and your work?
Sure. Since you invited me to do this, I've done a little reading or just to remind myself what is behind worry, and what I was reminded of is that it's just a natural part of who we are as human beings. Mm-hmm. It's natural to be afraid. It's natural to be happy. It's natural to be sad. It's natural for us to worry, and it's something that we shouldn't run from, but something that we should embrace. So, it's an emotional reaction to something that we perceive that's going to happen. It might be something that's real, or it might be imagined. But obviously it has a negative effect upon us if we allow that. But as I thought through this, like fear is good for us, and it can be bad for us if we allow it to overtake us. Worry can be good for us. It can work for us, or it can work against us, but we get to make the choice. And so the key for us is to have a right mindset around how worry works in our life, what contribution it has to make in our lives, and then having strategies to manage it effectively.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to pause here for a second. So for any of you who are joining us live and you have a question for David or me, feel free to go ahead and pop that into the chat and we will get to that. But I love, David, what you said about how worry is it's natural. But it's also about just being really in tune with it in terms of whether it helps us or it hinders us. So I live in Virginia, and last week, or actually I guess it was last Friday, dentists or dental offices were one of the groups that were allowed to start seeing patients again and reopen. And it just so happened that I had a teeth cleaning scheduled for today. And I worried so much about whether I was going to keep that appointment or not, because I was so unsure about what the whole thing was going to look like.
Sure.
So when the dental office called to confirm the appointment, I said and it was the front desk manager who was talking to me, and I said, could you just walk me through what I'm going to experience? Because I'm really worried. And I used the words, I'm just worried about what this is all going to look like. And she said to me, completely understandable. She said, here's the thing. She said, you're not going to come into the office until it's time for your appointment. We got rid of the waiting room. Mm-hmm. So you're going to call us from the parking lot. And when it's time to come in, we're going to call you and let you know. And you're going to come into the building, but our office door is going to be open. So the only door you have to touch is the one coming into the building. And when you come in, you'll see all of the hygienists and the dentists that'll be there in full PPE with face shields and a face mask. And she painted this beautiful picture of what it was to expect. And then when I got there this morning, and I saw my hygienist, Susan, that I've seen for years, who takes great care of me and everything. And there was this moment where she was standing there in her full PPE and the face shield, and she had her name on the front of it. And I'm standing over here, and I looked at her and I had my face mask on, and I go, can we just acknowledge I hate this? I go, I know we need to do this, but I just hate this, and it's awkward. And she said, I get it, and I know, and it's okay. And we've taken every measure we could possibly do here to wipe everything down and keep things safe and stuff. And she goes, and when you're ready, we're going to clean your teeth, because that's what we do. And just that alone took so much weight off of it, because it really was about acknowledging the worry that was there.
Yeah. And I noticed something you said at the very beginning of your story, and that is that she normalized the fact that you had this natural for you to have this fear, this apprehension, this anxiety around this situation.
Yeah.
I think that and so that connects with what I was saying, that it's a natural thing to feel anxiety in stressful situations. And mm-hmm. our head goes ahead of us, and it starts anticipating the bad things that can happen. And and then that's where the anxiety, the stress kicks in. And so you found a very strategic way of neutralizing the situation up front for yourself by just saying, hey, can I just acknowledge this?
Mm-hmm.
Can we just get this out in the open and all be aware and get on the same page with this?
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned something earlier that worry can either help us or hinder us. Can you talk with us? Talk with us a little bit about ways that you see worrying helping us right now.
Yeah, I did. I thought through this a little bit. I was asking myself, okay, how can worry work for us, and how does worry work against us? So, in working for us, worry helps us or drives us or moves us to think forward, to be forward thinking, and to be thinking about, well, what's the possibilities? What's going to happen here? And that can lead us to a place where we start thinking about, well, what do I do to prepare myself for that? We can think about a plan of action, start taking steps towards preparing ourselves for what we think could possibly happen. The COVID situation is a perfect example. I have a fitness trainer that comes to the house. He hasn't been here in 7 weeks. I've been wanting to get him back here. We're finally at a comfortable place where we think we can do that. He lives with his grandparents, obviously retired, and so we don't want to expose them. I don't know who he's been around and whether he's been protecting himself. So we've had to go through all of that conversation and make sure that we're on the same page. My partner, Alex, is just really concerned about anybody coming in and out of the house that might have been exposed somewhere along the way. So there's apprehension there. So what we just started planning of how we're going to make it happen and put strategic conversations in place and began to assure each other that we're both taking care of the situation so that nobody would be exposed. And so that, to me, is a strategic way of taking worry and turning it to work for ourselves. And so the second piece of that is how can it be destructive? In that context of COVID, just becoming paralyzed in our thoughts, not wanting to be around anybody, or not thinking of strategic things that could be done to make it work in our favor. In our schooling, I want to put this in context of our schooling, our coaching schooling, and we've learned two terms that I think are important that could help put this in context. So when I think of it working for us, worry working for us, I think of constructive action, that it's something that's build us up and prepare us for what we anticipate might happen, and we call that anabolic. An anabolic scenario, or I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to say there, other than to say that when it's working for us, it's working for us in an anabolic way. It's constructive. It's building us up. It's moving us to the next place. Whereas if it's catabolic, then it's going to be destructive. It's going to hold us back and keep us from moving forward and keep us from being more problem-solving oriented than to be. I've lost my train of thought. So what happens when you get?
You're absolutely right. I mean, we talk about anabolic energy and catabolic energy, and for anybody who's listening that has either worked with us or worked with a coach who's administered the Energy Leadership Index to them, we talk a lot about those two different types of energy, and you explained them beautifully, in that the anabolic energy is energy that is going to uplift us and motivate us and move us forward, where the catabolic energy is energy that's going to hold us back. And so I want to pause and bring in a question here, because and Saul, thank you for being with us today. So Saul is asking, he says, what are a few suggestions for people to effectively sway off the worry of how long this situation may last and what the quote unquote new normal may look like? I was wondering if you had any thoughts. Isn't that great?
That's a great question. And of course, we're all experiencing the same things, and we're thinking the same things, and we have anxiety around the same thing. So it's a great question, Saul. And I wish I was the guru that had all the answers. I can only tell you from my own personal experience how I'm dealing with it, how I'm managing it, and so let's think through this together. I mean, I think that my first step is to decide that we're going to approach this from an anabolic, strategic way of problem solving, rather than to yield to a negative perspective that really is going to cause us to be more stressed out. So you're asking for suggestions to effectively sway off worry. Mm-hmm. So I think we start with our mindset. And this is where in any situation and around my coaching, I start talking with people about their values. Reconnect to your values. What's important to you? What's driving you? And whenever we look at our set of values, we realize that it's our values that keep us grounded and keep us connected to good thinking, anabolic thinking, and making good decisions, and not giving into the stress of worry and to the fear of that we might contract the virus, and if we did, are we going to be able to get through it, or we're going to yield to it. So I think that we start with our mindset, and we just kind of reconnect to our values and realize that our values are going to lead us down a thought process, and we get to choose that thought process. And as the thought process for us is going to be anabolic, it's going to be positive. It's going to be anticipating that the good things are going to happen, and that's going to cause us to move into making some decisions that are going to help us to move more further into the anabolic action.
So let me layer on a couple things with that, and I thought you explained them really, really well. So, Saul, I love how you phrased it as it's the new normal. And for, David, a lot of people who are following me either on Facebook or on Instagram, if you're not following me on Instagram, you need to check us out, because we're going to be over on Instagram tomorrow at 1:00. So join David and me there. But this whole idea of the new normal and what has caused worry has caused because of the uncertainty. And if you are somebody who is not currently employed, there is understandable worry of when are you going to be able to get back to work, or when are you going to be able to find a job and get back into that situation. And so where worry really stems from, and David, you were talking about this too, is that there is a balance of control that has shifted, right? In that we worry because things are out of our control, right? We wish for things to happen, right? You might wish for $1 million. You might wish for, a wonderful birthday celebration or something like that. But we worry about things when we don't really have control over them. And that's where, and this is to your point, David, about spiraling into a lot of the catabolic energy, we can end up fighting a lot of that. We can end up almost feeling a victim to circumstances in those types of things. And so the worry, and swaying off the worry is really, for me, Saul, it's about the perspective of what do you have control over, and what are you able to take action on, right? You could sit there, someone could sit there who's not currently employed and worry that they're never going to be able to find another job. But if you haven't sent out applications or applied to positions online, and you just sat there and worried, there's no action to help sway off the worry. And so one of the things I would say to you is get really clear about what you have control over and what you don't, and help and see if that in any way, based on your actions, sways off some of the worry. What do you think about that, David?
That's a great recovery. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to recover.
This is my first podcast, and I get a little nervous in doing these things.
No, you were great.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I got a little
So
lost.
we got a couple more questions here. So we're gonna keep going with this. So Rachel, it is good to see you, and belated happy birthday. So Rachel writes here that the school district I'm working for is looking at a $60 million shortfall for next year. And David, I don't know if you caught the beginning, David is an educator as well. We also voted last night to furlough on Fridays for the rest of the year. What do you suggest to help the anxiety of the what ifs?
So what are the what ifs in that situation? You know, so when you start looking at them, what if I don't get a job for 6 months? What am I going to do about money? How am I going to take care of the family, take care of the mortgage? What ifs? What if somebody gets sick in the course of all of this in my home? What if I get sick? What if I, you know, what if I can't take care of the food on the table in the course of time? So I look into my own self, and I've been through the thought processes as well. What if I get sick? Who's going to take care of me? What's going to happen with my partner in terms of the domicile situation and the living situation? You know, so it's a frightening and worrisome situation. So I think that, again, we go back and we get deep in ourselves and we ask the questions, okay, what is it that I can do about this? What is it that I can take care of now to be sure that things go smoother if something doesn't happen in the timing that it needs to happen? One of the things we've done, we're not hoarders, but we're making sure that we're picking up an extra item or two at the store in case this thing comes back in the fall. And we know that people are going to hit the stores again. So we're kind of being proactive in our thinking, making sure that we have what we need, making sure that we have what we need in our medications, because you can't even find Tylenol on the shelves at this point. Things like that. So we're being a little proactive in those areas. So maybe the key word here is being proactive, forward thinking and proactive, and taking the little steps now and preparing yourself for what's going to come. Now, if they're laying people off at this point, that's serious business.
Yep.
You know, obviously, the first thing you've got to do is file for workman's for unemployment wages, and then you've got to kick in a means of a strategy for start applying for jobs. So, I mean, there's plenty of action-oriented items that you can take, and I think that that's the key to keeping the stress level down, is staying engaged with what it is that you need to do to prepare yourself and to help yourself get through this, and also staying engaged with your family and making sure that you're spending the time there to nurture those relationships, so you can keep the stress down for the children as well. What do you think, John?
No, David, I agree, and you actually kind of funneled into Billy's question, who asked about how do we prepare for the new normal, and I think it is absolutely what you said, which is really kind of seeing what could be down the road. You know, Rachel, to your point, you know, voting on a furlough to furlough every Friday. Let's also acknowledge that's a 20% cut. That's a 20% cut in the amount of time you're working. It's a 20% amount of cut time. You know, how much you're being paid. And so obviously there are things that school districts and organizations are understandably going to have to take a look at. And David, you know, I know Rachel a little bit, so there's some familiarity here. We used to work together previously on a job. You know, Rachel, one of the things I know about you is I know you're a planner, and you think very strongly about all of the different scenarios and things that are out there. Use that to your advantage in a way of really seeing the entire situation. So if you're taking a 20% cut, what does that mean for your household budget? What does that mean for things that you have? I was having a conversation with someone a few weeks ago who had been laid off from his job and was actively looking for new employment, and was able to help him position himself very strategically to end up getting a new job. Side note, in literally landed his dream job with a substantial salary increase all during COVID, which was, you know, a great thing on his part. But, I hear from so many people and they're like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't want to tap into my savings. Totally understandable, right? Your savings are there. Your savings are there for a reason. And what if you have to use your savings for a reason you hadn't intended? I mean, those are some of the harsh realities that we're facing because of COVID. What does that mean if you're not able to retire when you wanted to because you need to work a little bit longer because you had to tap into some of your money? What kind of changes do you have to make in terms of your, where you set the thermostat at, or the extra groceries that you can't buy and stuff? I mean, these are all legitimate what ifs that we're facing. And I think the other part is you can't prepare for every single possible scenario because COVID's a moving target. We don't know what's really going to happen here. And I will share with you that while I am not a huge fan of Dr. Phil, there was something he wrote in one of his books, probably about 15 years ago, and I can see the cover. It was like a red cover with him standing there. I forget what was in the book, the title of the book, but there was a quote in there, and he said, we as human beings are very resilient, and we know that we can handle any situation because we'll figure it out. We can't have all the answers in front of us all the time, but we will figure it out. And that whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. And to your point earlier about mindset work, David, I mean, that's one of those things in our minds we can really maybe lean on pretty heavily right now, is that, we're resilient. We're going to figure it out. It's okay to not have all the answers right now. And that's where some of the worry can really stem from. But we'll figure out what we need to do.
So, and there's something that is heavy on my heart, and I wanted to bring to this discussion today for those that are participating, is I'm around a lot of people who don't think that they're vulnerable to this virus.
Yeah.
We have over 71,000 people dead. They're expecting to double that by August. And so somebody else is going to be in that second cycle of 71,000. So my thing is that, what is it that you've done to prepare yourself for this if it comes to you? I have a friend who I went to high school with, 64-year-old principal of one of the high schools here in Houston. He's been in the hospital for 7 weeks. He was in intensive care for 3 weeks on the ventilator. He got lucky. He beat this. He walked out of the hospital yesterday. Very weak, but still on his feet and out. But it was touch and go for about 8 days there, whether he would make it through. So it can happen to any of us. And so and right now, you don't know whether you have it or not, because if you've probably not been tested. I haven't been tested. I assume that I don't have it. I don't feel sick. But they say that a lot of people don't know that they have it because they don't have the symptoms. So we have to do the things that we need to do to protect ourselves and to protect other people. But there's also another level of preparation, and that is, what have you done to make sure that the things are in place for you to be cared for if you get it, or if someone in your family gets it? What have you done to prepare for that? Are there the meds in place? Are there the foods in place? Is there somebody who's going to take care of your children if you have small children? Who's going to sleep where? Things like that. How's this person going to be cared for that gets ill? So those are the things that you can be proactive about it, and by being proactive and having a plan in place and the resources in place ahead of time, just in case it happens, that decreases the stress level, the anxiety, because you have some level of preparation, and that's going to help you to get through it. You don't have it all of a sudden at once, because a lot of people who are getting this disease, that they pass away within a week. So those are the things you have to think about. Well, the things that we thought about is, what about the paperwork? Is my paperwork in place if I pass away in a week? So those are things that can be done now, and those things take time to get in place. Probably already have them in place, but maybe they need to be revisited just in case.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because it does bring up the conversation, and Richard and I were talking about this the other night, is that we haven't updated our will in about 7 years, and we're due to update it. But it's like, we're very thankful we have a will in place, right? And you don't have a will in place because COVID happens, or you don't have a will in place because the bus might run you over. You have a will in place because you care about the people whom you love, and you want to make sure that they're appropriately taken care of. Heaven forbid something happens.
That's
right.
Great,
That's such a great point, that what COVID has done is really shine a very bright light, or hold up a very large mirror for us to look into and simply say, how much do I have in order? And what is there for me to, what do I need to take care of right now? And it's everything from personal and professional, spiritual. You look at our bucket lists and things like that. I know I'm not getting to Australia anytime soon right now, but if I don't make it there, I'm okay with that too, because there are other things we have to worry about, right? And so to your point, worry about not having certain things done, taking that kind of action could certainly alleviate some of that worry if something were to happen, right? And that's the thing. I mean, we're focused so much on COVID, but what if somebody needs to have an elective surgery done, right? Or they need a surgery that's really important for their health that they can't get in and have right now. I mean, there's so many things that, because we've been asked to stay home, or been, some like to say, forced to stay at home, that we just have to take a look at. And so we have to make a choice, back to the catabolic or the anabolic energy, right? We make a choice as to how we want to show up, as to whether we want to wallow in the worry or take an action that may potentially alleviate some of that worry.
And I think that's the key to all of our conversation, John, is just deciding that we're going to have an anabolic mindset, a positive, optimistic. That doesn't mean that we're ignoring the realities. Sure. It just means that we're making a very determined decision to be proactive in our thinking, and that active thinking is going to move us forward to being strategic and proactive in our decisions and our actions.
Right. I'm following the chat here, and Rachel, thank you for those comments, and we're back to answering her question and things like that. I'm going to share this with you, David, and everybody else who's listening, but and I talk about this a lot in the book, about the relationship that I had with my mom and my dad, but how the whole definition of how I have learned to show up has really been enveloped by the lessons I've learned from them and what we experienced together. But so if anybody ever pickpockets me, you're going to know this. So hidden in my wallet and folded up is $100 bill that my mom had given me. Oh. And she said to me, you put this in your wallet, and if ever there is an emergency, you use it. And I still have that $100 bill that is stuck in my wallet, sandwiched between a couple of things that are in there. And I will tell you that there have been times where I have thought about spending that, right? And going, I might need to use this, right? Like I might need to use it to put gas in the car, or to buy groceries, or whatever it would be. And having that $100 bill folded up in my wallet is a sense of security in that sense, right? Like I know, yeah, things will be okay. It'll work out. I'll find a way, kind of a thing. But I think in some ways we all have $100 bill metaphorically folded up somewhere, right? That we use for our own security and safety in times like this. And I know for me that I can get myself into a very deep and dark hole if I allow myself to, because I am a worrier by nature. But after 51 years of a lot of growth and development, I'd like to say I'm a little bit better at it. But that's part two. Like we have to identify where we get to trigger what that all looks like, and be careful and be mindful of that too, in that respect.
Yeah, John, I think what you just said is important. You said I'm a worrier. I actually wrote that down to admit that at the beginning of all of this. I have worried in my time, and after 65 years, I'd like to calculate how many hours I've spent that in worry, and it's just a natural part of who we are. I think, we've already emphasized the key is just putting in place strategies for managing it.
Yeah.
And those strategies should be flexible, because from one phase of life to another, we're different people. We have different resources that we've developed within ourselves and that we have accessible to ourselves. And so I think the focus of all of this is just taking the right mindset of the thought process, and which leads to the right actions. And taking the actions that help us to keep the worry in perspective, because the worry really, it doesn't go away. There's not a day you live that you're not going to worry about something.
So you got time for one more question before we wrap it up? All right. So Billy was talking to us earlier, and you had kind of answered this a little bit about the new normal. He says, with the new normal, how can we communicate with our company when they haven't given us any directions? And so, Billy, as you're listening to this, do me a quick favor. Are you currently employed? Are you furloughed or laid off? Can you give us a little context around that? Because that's going to actually help shape the answer here. So if you could just type that into the chat. I mean, obviously, there's an understandable concern, David, that if you're working for a company and you're not getting a lot of information, that can certainly be troublesome or even worrisome, that not knowing what's next type thing. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this.
It's hard to answer the question because you don't know.
He's been laid off, by the way. So he's been laid off.
Oh, you've been laid off. Okay.
Yeah.
So now that, so you don't have the issue anymore if you've been laid off about how.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, Billy, to David's point here, and this is why I asked you to clarify, if you've been laid off, you are no longer employed by that company. They owe you nothing. They do not have to tell you anything. You are no longer an employee with them. If you've been furloughed, which is you've been let go with an expectation you will return to work, that's a different story. That's a different situation. But if you've been laid off, you are no longer an employee of that company. That company doesn't need to tell you anything at that point because you're no longer employed by them. So, and I know that's hard. I'm not trying to be harsh, but that is the reality of the definition about being laid off. You're just no longer an employee with them.
So which is it? Is it, or have you been laid off or furloughed?
So he says he's been laid off.
Okay.
He's been laid off. Yeah.
Laid off. Okay.
Yeah, he's been laid off. Yeah, he said laid off. And give a quick shout out to Jeff. So Jeff was a guest on Instagram a few weeks ago. Jeff works at a hospital. So Jeff, thank you for the work that you do there. He's an OT, but he says he feels very safe there with the measures that have been made.
That's
so
great.
Yeah. So David, we've gone a little bit longer than planned, and I want to thank everybody for sticking around with us today and being part of the conversation. But as we wrap up, I'm just going to ask you the question I typically do to end the show with, and that is, we've modified this after 97 shows, so I'm gonna find it here in my list here. But what advice would you give someone to help them show up right now, especially because of COVID?
Yeah, well, let me just begin with thank you again for having me and for being patient with me and giving me this first time opportunity to participate in the podcast.
Yeah, great.
I appreciate it, John. I say do something. Surround yourself with the right people. Make sure that you're feeding your heart and your mind. Exercise your faith. Stay engaged. Don't let yourself become consumed with the negative side of thinking, and just plan. Make things happen for yourself, and it doesn't have to be big, overwhelming things, just small things every day, just a little here, a little there. And in closing, I just want to encourage you to be gentle and kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This is a really important time that we treat ourselves with care. And then as we treat ourselves with care, we can, out of that abundance of loving ourselves, then we can just let it flow over to the people that come into our world, especially those we love the most, those that live with us, those that are in our family.
Absolutely. Well said. So thank you. So David, I want to thank you. Pardon me. Thanks for being a guest today. If you want to hear us continue the conversation, David and I will be live on my Instagram channel tomorrow, which is Thursday at 1 o'clock. So just hop in, join the conversation with us there. We're going to continue this a little bit more. So thank you for agreeing to be my guest over on Instagram tomorrow. But David, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way they can do that?
So I have a website. It's pretty much a landing page. There's not a lot of resources on it. I did it myself and launched it last week. And there is the website. And my email address is the same as my name, D.E. Diehl, at dedehlcoaching.com.
Yep. Absolutely. So feel free to reach out with David if you have any additional questions or follow-up from today's conversation, even just to thank him for being a guest, because I appreciate everybody sticking around. If you have any particular questions for me, you can always email me at john@johnnerrell.com. I am available for group and one-on-one coaching. So if you have an interest in getting coaching right now, especially to help you with some of the transitions that are going on for you professionally because of COVID, I certainly encourage you to check that out and message me about that. And lastly, and just one last thing, please go ahead and check out my new book. It is called Show Up: 6 Strategies to Lead a More Energetic and Impactful Career. It is on Amazon. It just launched on Barnes & Noble today, so you can check it out there. And David, I'm going to thank you. This is going to be a see you later, because I'm going to see you tomorrow over on Instagram at 1 o'clock at John Nerrell Coaching. And thank you so much for your insight and perspective and the value you brought to today's conversation. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your love, everyone.
All right, you got it. Everybody take care, stay safe and be well, and I'll see you tomorrow over on Instagram. Take care. Bye-bye.